Good evening, everyone. This hearing is now starting. My name is Jonathan Gomwalk, and I'm the hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waters is the clerk for this hearing. Cerise Waiters, is the clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded, and a sign-in sheet is on the table on the side of the room. Please be sure to sign in for our records, and so that if necessary, we can contact you in the future regarding the item you are here for. The public hearing is being held to consider 5 appeals from property owners that were assessed fines for excessive or illegal pruning of trees, for not planting a replacement tree, or for illegally removing a tree. They are Order number 201883 to consider the removal of 1 significant tree with replacement at 100 Vasquez Avenue. Order number 201884 to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 312 Locust Street. Order number 201885 to consider the removal of 3 street trees with 1 replacement adjacent to 282 Herman Street. Order number 201887 to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement of 2 trees adjacent to 949 Fillmore Street, and the removal of 2 street trees without replacement adjacent to 950 Fillmore Street. And order number 201888 to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement adjacent to 2445 Hyde Street, Francisco Park, and 3 olive trees are in sidewalk on Bay Street. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimony, and help our Director of Public Works to make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I'll forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director makes all the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you what they are. Therefore, if you want to be notified, please sign in. The hearing will proceed as follows for each case. I'll ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow the property owner or appellant to speak, any member of the public or witness who wants to speak, then the department, if the department would like to address any comments, and then the property owner or appellant again, if that person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers. When you hear the first bell, it means the speaker has 30 seconds left to speak. A louder second bell signals that the time is up. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing, and I'd like to begin first with order number 201883 to consider the removal of 1 significant tree with replacement at 100 Vasquez Avenue. Public Works, please state your name for the record.
My name is Madeline Farquhar. I'm with Urban Forestry. Just wanted to give a quick overview of Public Works and Urban Forestry before we start. Public Works strategic plan goal number 1 is to ensure safe, clean, and green infrastructure and public right-of-ways. And one way we're trying to do this is through the citywide street tree maintenance program that we call Street Tree SF. For anybody who doesn't know the history of Street Tree SF, in 2016, a ballot measure was passed that gave back control of all the maintenance for street trees and street tree-related sidewalk damage in the city. And since July 1st, 2017, we've been implementing that program. Here you can see a tree pruning schedule is very small, so if you want to, I'm sorry. Let me actually go into, there, that's much better. There we go. If anybody has any questions about Street Tree SF, you can ask me after the hearing. We're trying to get to every part of the city within 3 to 5 years and prune our 125,000 street trees. And we're chunking through that in the first 2 years. So on to order number 201883, 100 Vasquez, removal of 1 significant tree with replacement. Staff denied the removal and the applicant has appealed. This is a pretty tough case. There's a lot of moving pieces. Just give a quick overview of the current conditions of the tree. It's a Monterey cypress, and you can see that it's kind of sandwiched in between quite a few different things on the street. There's several buildings surrounding it, as well as some high voltage power lines that I'll show a little bit better in a later slide. And you can also see that that's kind of dictated the structure of the tree over time. Just the surrounding site constraints and the different conditions that it's experienced. There's a lot of challenging issues here. So just go on with more overview of the tree. There are some concerning issues at the base of the tree that we've seen over the years, and I'll give a bit more site background here in a minute. We have a lot of history with this case. There is some evidence of decay at the base of the trunk. We've got some missing bark and a bulge, which can often indicate decay. Here you can get a better look at the high voltage power lines. Again, the photos aren't the best, but you can see kind of where they're running through and where PG&E has habitually pruned them away from the lines just for safety. So this picture on the right is a good example of the structure of the tree as it is now. There are a lot of issues here. There's not a whole lot of canopy except for at the very ends of the branches, which means that the weight of the tree branch is all at the end of the branch, and it can often cause undue strain to the branch. You can see that there's a lot of acute angles of attachment with the branches. That often indicates they're weakly attached. And then overall, yeah, you can just see the canopy isn't covering the entire length of the tree. What we call live crown ratio is a little bit low. So that's basically the height of the canopy compared to the height of the overall tree structure. And this can often cause structural issues. So this is just an example of how Monterey cypress usually want to grow when they have, a wide space and they can kind of spread out and send their branches out as they normally would. And you can do a comparison of how this tree, the structural issues are kind of due to the site constraints. So just a little history of this site. Back in 2010, the applicant originally applied for removal. It was denied by the Bureau, and then it went on to the Board of Appeals. Board of Appeals upheld our decision to deny the removal and set out just a few requirements moving forward in terms of maintenance of the tree, including annual inspections by Public Works and regular pruning by the property owner. Since the original permitting process, we know the tree has experienced limb failures. In November 2018, 2 branches broke from the upper canopy and grounded PG&E lines, as well as damaged a parked vehicle. So we do understand the concerns surrounding this tree. And this is just another photo of the damage left over by those branch failures. And we want to be really upfront about all the challenging issues with this tree, but we also need to explain why we're denying the application once again. We know it can be definitely disconcerting when large tree branches fail, but these failures don't always necessarily indicate major health issues present in the tree. More often the result of poor structure, which we believe can be mitigated by more regular pruning of the upper canopy, specifically the reduction of end weight on the branches in the upper canopy and the lower scaffolding branches. However, we're open to reviewing any additional evidence provided by another arborist level 3 assessment of decay present in the tree. We know there's neighborhood support for retaining this tree in the past and currently, and we don't want to downplay the excellent benefits this tree provides in terms of carbon sequestration, wildlife habitat, shade, and stormwater runoff mitigation. We know from testimony that it's important bird habitat for this neighborhood, just for being such a large stature tree. And I believe that is it for me.
Thank you. Is the property owner or appellant here like to speak? Property owner appellant for 100 Vasquez Avenue. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak addressing this matter? Yes, sir. Please step forward and state your name for the record.
My name is Tim Reiterman, R-E-I-T-E-R-M-A-N. My wife Susan and I are the nearest neighbors to this majestic Monterey cypress that abuts and rises above our property. We support the city's decision to reject the removal for the Bureau's stated reasons and others. This tree, with an estimated age of 90 or more years and a trunk diameter of 75 plus inches, is exactly the sort of significant tree the city's law aims to protect. It's the centerpiece of the Forest Hill Extension neighborhood landscape and is one of the oldest and largest trees in western San Francisco. As noted earlier, it provides habitats for a large variety of birds and squirrels and so forth. This is the second attempt in a decade by the homeowner to try to remove this irreplaceable tree. As noted, the Board of Permit Appeals denied or upheld DPW's denial of a permit after extensive study and careful inspections by the city's urban foresters, testimony by neighbors, and examinations by 2 arborists, including ours, who provided reports and resistograph test results. DPW's 2010 permit denial cited this testing in determining the tree's soundness and noted that the tree's foliage showed good vigor as it does today. It also noted what we had witnessed over 25 years, and that is that the tree has suffered inappropriate and excessive pruning on one side, leaving the tree with an unbalanced canopy. The limb failure that damaged or destroyed several parkway shrubs, and partially blocked the street, it helped prompt the initial application. In rejecting it, DPW identified the issue of potential limb failure, but said it would target our property, not the homeowners, and the department directed them to reduce the weight of the branches and to thin the crown. And there was one pruning in December 2010. Since then, we're not aware of any regular maintenance of the tree other than what PG&E does to clear its lines. And we've watched this gross imbalance grow with excessive weight and end weight above our property, the sidewalk, and the street. Then the predictable happened. The current application was triggered by at least one branch failure, which the city had warned about in 2010. And we believe, as the foresters concluded, that these conditions can and will be mitigated, or should be mitigated, to protect public safety and the tree. We also believe that no homeowner should be rewarded with a permit after helping create the same conditions being used to argue for removing a significant tree that provides benefits to the community and the environment.
Thank you very much, sir. You can submit in writing if you wish to.
I will.
To the clerk. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public? Yes, please step forward to the mic, state your name.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Susan Reiterman, and I also live next door. I'm the nearest neighbor to this tree. I respectfully submit comments based on 34 years of careful observation of the tree's impact on and special value to the neighborhood and wildlife. My observations began the day we moved in 1985. This tree is an important part of the forest in Forest Hill Extension, and it contributes to the character and aesthetics of the neighborhood as well as sightlines in a city which has a low level of canopy cover. Its deep green presence soothes the predominant hardscape, and it helps clean the air. It provides significant wildlife habitat for squirrels and common and unusual birds, especially raptors, and I'd like to include in my a list for you. It's also a temporary landing spot for migrating birds and the local wild parrots. I have also been able to observe the condition and treatment of this tree for 34 years. When the current homeowners at 100 Vasquez purchased the property in 1995, they took responsibility for a spectacular native California tree with a strong track record. It was beautiful, thriving, and never had dropped a limb. It looked much more like that than the other side, and I am including similar photos. It withstood the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake and the tremendous windstorm of 1995 when winds reached upwards of 100 miles an hour and took down many trees throughout the city. It also withstood a huge windstorm in 2008, which damaged many large specimens. The tree continues to fruit and grow. It also survived brutal pruning and neglect, which led to a serious imbalance in its first limb failure 10 years ago. We are the only property owners we know of who have been damaged by a limb, but we do not blame the tree. We did engage extensive scientific testing to find out if the tree is healthy and safe. It was determined that the tree was sound and could be expected to live for decades. The danger of limb failure brought on by the imbalance and improper pruning could be reduced by regular inspection and proper pruning. This has not happened in 9 years. This tree is a city treasure, and it should be maintained as such. It's the law, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to submit my full.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Step forward to Mike.
My name is Josh Klipp, San Francisco resident and tree advocate, for lack of a better name. I would just like to encourage the director to uphold the Bureau of Urban Forestry's denial and set some good precedent here by really pushing for mitigation whenever that is possible, as opposed to just removing a tree. I would also like to request that, assuming mitigation is what goes forward here, that be done with the caveat that a certified arborist is on site and supervising those efforts, as opposed to just hiring somebody with a chainsaw to go up there and climb it and make it perhaps even worse. And judging by what the neighbors have said, it sounds like this might need to be spelled out for that neighbor. And then I would just finish with saying that in this era of dire climate change and daily ecological collapse, mature trees are an irreplaceable benefit, especially ones that are native to this geographic area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Nolte. I am the author of the Significant Tree Ordinance. I was the catalyst for it to happen. And also my family lived on several properties within 2 blocks of this location of this tree for 40 years. And I personally have seen the tree when I was younger. I grew up in this neighborhood. Secondly, I was asked by neighbors in the neighborhood to speak on this item because I have consulted with them. And I told them this item was on the agenda tonight. So I've been asked by the current neighbors within the neighborhood to speak on it, and I too agree with the recommendation that's on the agenda to not replace or not to remove the significant tree and keep it there, and also if it needs any trimming to do so, but to keep it back, because again, if it's 90 years old, it's only at 1/6 of it. This is Monterey cypress. It's only at 1/6 of its lifespan, so it has another 300 years plus to go. So I feel that this tree, let it live its 300-year life that it should have as a Monterey cypress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can you step forward to the mic, state your name for the record?
Hi, my name is Michael Nolte, and as you just heard, I've had relatives that have lived with for many years around this tree. Obviously, this tree is kind of like a center of the community, and when somebody decides to basically destroy a significant tree, you know, the community should be saying something. Hey, not now. And if the tree this particular tree has many more years to go, give it a chance to do that. It's already gone through several hearings, and each time the decision-making bodies that have heard this issue have decided to weigh in favor of keeping the tree there. As you heard the next door neighbor say that the tree has obviously been a good neighbor to them by sticking around. And, you know, I think people have to kind of weigh what does a tree provide and whether or not the tree can continue to provide it. You know, it's rare that we can say that a tree is going to stick around, hopefully for a couple hundred years, and provide some sort of you know, it's going to be our legacy. This is the legacy for me, you know, if it stays. And maybe I want to carve my initials in it. No, but anyway, because it will stay longer than me. So, you know, leave something behind. I forgot this is not being televised, so I could say this. So, but anyway, you know, I think people want to know about their legacy. You know, so this is a legacy tree, and we need to keep the legacy going. And you know, what I need to say to get people to understand, legacies mean that, legacies. And I think the residents have spoken here all in favor of keeping the tree. We haven't seen anybody really come out tonight. I don't think you're going to hear anybody come out tonight saying, remove the tree. I may be wrong, but so far they haven't. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to comment on this matter? No one else. This item is now closed. Thank you. We will now move on to the second item, number 201884, and Public Works.
Thanks. Madeline Farquhar, Urban Forestry. This is to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 312 Locust. Staff has denied the removal, and the applicant has appealed. Excuse me. This application was originally for the removal of 3 flowering cherries on Locust, but tree number 3 is actually already dead. It is a small dead sapling, so it doesn't require a permit to remove and replace. So the desire of the applicant is to remove and replace these flowering cherries with ginkgo trees. The trees have been slow growing, and we do appreciate the desire to replace with a more large stature tree. However, when inspecting, we couldn't find any major defects, and they have performed very nicely the last year or two. As you can see on the right, we pulled this image from Google Maps. I believe it was April of this year, and so it flowered really nicely and is looking very healthy now. So just to be consistent with similar cases we've heard this year, we denied that application.
Thank you. Is the property owner appellant here for this case number? Please.
Condo Association that's made this request.
All right, please state your name.
My name is John Knechtel,
Can you hold the mic? Can you bring the mic a bit closer?
Knechtel.
All right.
First name John. I have some pictures. I don't know if you'd like to see them now. It might help to.
You can place them on the projector.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so I'll cut to the chase. Our main concern is that, well, first of all, yes, the 2 are flowering beautifully. The dead tree was flowering beautifully until it stopped. So we're not concerned about that. So first here, you'll notice we had the same tree, a tree in this same position 20 years ago, and we let it grow to maturity. It began pushing up the concrete. We had to then remove a full-grown tree. We want to try to avoid that scenario. Again, you'll notice it's starting to crack, and the roots are pushing and are growing horizontally. We want to have a tree that will have more vertical roots and plant it so that it will encourage vertical rather than horizontal roots, and avoid having to deal with a full-grown tree at some later time and with possible danger and issues. So this is a couple of those, and basically that's our position, that in order to try to avoid future problems and to get a better tree, and this is the tree across the trees across the street that are growing well. Let's see, no, I can't, let's see if I have it here. And here, for example, that's the dead tree. So that was flowering beautifully until it wasn't. And then across the street, we have trees that have been put in long after ours and are growing very well and healthy. So again, our request is that we be allowed to replace the 3, as opposed to just the 1 tree, with 3 consistent trees, and work with the gardeners to make sure that we have proper training, planting, and setup of the trees and care for the trees. Okay.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the public or witness that wishes to speak regarding this matter? Yes, sir. Can you state your name for the mic, please?
Yes, my name is Stephen Krolik, K-R-O-L-I-K, and I'm supporting the city's decision not to remove the trees. And I've lived on Locust Street, the 400 block, for almost 45 years. Some people consider me to be the mayor of my block. Of course, I don't get paid, but I appreciate that. So we take care of our trees in the 400 block. We planted jade under some trees. Everything's doing quite well. And over the years, I have observed these 2 trees, or 3, and I think basically it's neglect. There's a certain amount of emotionality with this issue. And I watched the 3rd tree die, and I was very disappointed to witness that. And at the bases of the trees, there's really no care being given. Now, there's some people in the neighborhood who have spoken with me, and we've had a dialogue about this issue. And it seems the consensus is to keep the trees there, but also to replace the tree that unfortunately has died and replace it with the same species as the other 2 trees. And that will give you the uniformity, it'll give you the aesthetics, and it's very pleasing because when these trees do blossom in the spring, they're quite beautiful to look at. It's an encouragement to make our city more beautiful, and appreciation from people who have lived there a long time. And my background is in visual anthropology, so I'm sort of have my eye on the neighborhood and only want for the best. And I don't want to create any animosities about this issue. My central platform is the beauty of the trees, replace the dead tree with the same 2 trees that are there that are growing quite well. But the neglect is obvious. They're not being watered, and the trees are under stress. And I don't know why the individuals who are owners in the condominium are not giving some care to the trees, basically, because that would be beneficial to not only the residents of the condominium, but all the people who walk up and down that particular segment of the street, the 300 block. And in the 400 block, we see children admiring the trees, the flowers, and it's just a wonderful experience. And I don't know what else to say, other than that some of the people who want the trees to be there could not be here, so I decided to come, give this testimony, support the decision by the city, and I think that'll make a lot of people happy. But they cannot neglect those trees or they're going to die like the third one did die. So it's loving care, it's appreciation of aesthetics, and I think we'll all be happy if the owners can fulfill by watering the trees, something very basic.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Johnny.
Thank you. Yes, anyone else from the public? You will have a chance later on, sir, if you wish to rebut. Yes, sir.
Josh Klipp. So just a few points regarding the crack in the sidewalk. So I think it's common knowledge by now that sidewalks are no longer the property owner's responsibility. Those are now, after the passage of Prop E, now Street Tree SF, that is the city's issue. Regarding the dead tree, one thing I would point out is that that basin was full of really heavy-looking bricks, which is probably not a good idea for a young root ball of a tree. So when that basin is replanted, I think it might be useful if urban forestry could instruct the property owner on how to maintain a basin that's healthy and encourages tree growth. And then finally, I would just point out, I've been planting trees with Friends of the Urban Forest for the last 10 and a half years. I've probably planted about 700 trees in the city. And it takes approximately 3 years of attentive care for a tree to establish. And I've lost track of how many times I've planted a tree and had to go back and do it again and again because the homeowner failed to take care of it. So I would just point out that if you've got an established healthy tree, unless the tree is dead or dying or diseased or fatally wounded, it needs to stay.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak addressing this matter?
Hi, I'm Michael Nolte. I actually really appreciate coming to these meetings because they're normally all about trees, and I think you learn a lot. Those that, particularly those that are just coming for one agenda item, they get an opportunity to actually hear not just from the one agenda item why they're here, but if they actually, maybe you should force them to sit here through the whole meeting to, you laugh about this, but to hear really maybe some of the things that actually go on in the city and also about trees and tree care and the appropriateness of not only their tree, but the other trees that are happening in San Francisco. San Francisco has a tremendous amount of possibilities. It's just a matter of time. Now, you know, in this particular case, the trees seem to have, if the ones that are healthy, they should stay to be healthy and let them mature as possible. Anything that, anywhere, anytime where there is a tree that's ailing, then let's look at why it's ailing and what needs to, how to mitigate that, and how to fix it for the future so it doesn't happen. Now, as was just mentioned, who's responsible for the sidewalks and how in the future the tree basins, how they need to be configured. I think, again, people can really learn a lot. Maybe there needs to be a one-on-one on the tree site about how to take care of the trees. Just because you're a condo association and you hire somebody doesn't mean they know what the hell they're doing or who's doing it. And of course, you know, the city does the same thing. They hire people, but that doesn't mean they know what they're doing either. And we're stuck with just assuming that they're doing it. And we end up at hearings at the Board of Appeals because people are wanting to get their point across of watching the trees go and not understand the policies and why the policies have been. And we've actually made many of the people at the Board of Appeals become tree lovers. Because they start understanding we are now under a threat to maintain the trees because it's there are health issues and other concerns we have to think about for our future. So San Francisco loves trees, and I think I understand how property owners may feel, but and there may be liability issues or other concerns they think about when they have their meetings. but a tree should have a chair at the meeting too, maybe. Thank you.
So, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak regarding this item? Does the department have anything further they wish to add? Does the property owner have any rebuttals they wish to make? Yes, sir. Step up to the mic, please, sir.
Just a couple of items. One is, if we worked with the city to put these trees in, if they don't know what they're doing, where were you guys whenever that happened? Second is, this is the second tree that's died in that location. Replacing it with the same species, it would be of concern with for us. So if we're going to replace it with the same species that's already died twice there, I'm not sure we're going to have better success the next time.
Okay, I got you.
And again, if it's the city's responsibility for the concrete, then if we're sued for anything, we'll expect the city to cover us
Yes, sir.
if the concrete is damaged.
All right, thank you. If there are no further comments, this item is now closed. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Yeah.
The trees are dying because of neglect. I just want to mention that. The property owners are really not participating in the care of those trees. And so the trees are actually being sacrificed. And the trees in the past were not they were not being cared for. And these are testimonials from people who live in the condominium who have witnessed this. So to sum it all up, neglect will kill the tree. Love will create life for the tree. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. We will have a recommendation in 10 days, and then we can take it from there. Yeah. We'll now move on to the next item. Order number 201885 to consider the removal of 3 street trees with 1 replacement adjacent to 282 Herman Street.
Madeline Farquhar, Urban Forestry. We've approved the removal of these trees and the public has protested. This is just an overview of the site. It's 3 ficus trees that are planted fairly close together, just adjacent to a bus stop at the corner of Fillmore and Herman. Originally came out to this site several times because of service requests, because of branch failures. And when you look at them from far away, they don't look very large. This is kind of an old photo, but I can show you. This is current. Don't look very large, small stature, not a typical type of ficus that we would approve, but upon inspection, you can start to see some of the issues with these trees. They've been unfortunately topped in the past, I believe multiple times, just judging by looking back at Google Maps and things like that, and from our records. And you can see from the old topping cuts where there are multiple smaller branches just erupting from the large sort of stubby branches. It's really a difficult structure to deal with in the long term. It's tough to maintain a canopy that's not going to be hazardous over time with these kind of structures. Unfortunately, it was due to past bad pruning practices. But they also have some issues that are very typical with ficus, including the large codominant stems. You can see from the picture on the right, it's a little dark. But these are codominant stems are just 2 trunks that are very similar size, and they often have very weak attachments. So it's very typical of this species to unfortunately fail at those branch unions because there's what we call included bark inside the branch union. So where you can see those little seams where the branches meet is often not any wood actually attaching the branches together, but just bark inside that branch union. So it just makes for a really weak attachment. And you can see some evidence of branch failures here, and you can't see it very well, but some on the old topping cuts, there's some sort of fungus growing. I'm not sure if it's, a death sentence for the tree, but it's concerning. You can see it a little bit better here, that white area kind of in the center of the picture. But this is just showing some more of the bad structure here. So, again, not that great of a picture quality, but if anybody wants better quality, might be able to get it to you in an email. So this is just explaining why we only put these 3 trees as having 1 replacement. They were planted fairly close together, but this particular tree, tree 1, is just planted very close to utilities. So we have the water box there, and then it's also planted nearly on center with a street light. So unfortunately, because we have to plant at least 9 feet away from street lights, this one isn't replaceable. Tree 2 here, going down the sidewalk towards Fillmore, has very similar issues to tree 1. You can see some decay and old topping cuts. We've got some evidence of decay in the lower trunk, in the trunk flare. These trees, you can find old root pruning cuts on them. We're unsure of how many times they've been root pruned for sidewalk repair, but some of the cuts occur really close to the base of the tree. Again, not a terribly major concern because they're small stature, but not great for the possibility of introducing more decay to the tree. Tree 3, I forgot to say, tree 2 is the one that's replaceable, and it's probably in the best location for a replacement tree where we can plant something a little bit also large stature, but it can have room to grow, and we can choose a proper species that will be able to deal with the site conditions here. So tree number 3 here, down the line, closest to the bus stop, it has some concerning evidence of decay on the lower trunk. Both sides of the trunk, you can see decay columns moving up. One side looks pretty like it's sealing up, which is a good sign for tree vigor. On the other side, there's not as much response wood, so not a good sign for the vigor of the tree. Here you can see some more evidence of the topping cuts and poor structure. It's concerning when you have those big lower branches that are codominant, but it's equally concerning when they happen up in the upper canopy as well. So you can see in the picture on the left those really tight unions, so really prone to breakage. And the reason this one isn't replaceable is because it's located just about 15 feet from the stop sign, and we required to be at least 25 feet away. And it's not just urban forestry that's making these rules. It's kind of a multi-agency process that goes through and has these requirements for street trees, just so we can try to make better choices in the future and avoid conflicts that would cause tree removals in the future. And one of the major concerns by folks who protested these trees was that we were only replacing 1 tree. So we went out, and there's plenty of other spots on the block that are great replacement sites, lots of long stretches without trees. So we don't particularly want to replace or cannot replace at the bus stop, but there are other locations for replanting.
Thank you. Is the property owner or appellant here for this case, and do they wish to speak? Property owner, appellant, anyone from the public who wishes to speak regarding this item, please step forward to the mic, state your name.
Hi, Tom Benwick. I live on the block in 272 on that street, and I ideally would not like to have these trees removed at all. They're very important to this neighborhood to actually have some trees. If you look down the other side of Herman, there's plenty of green, and it makes the neighborhood be a lot better. And removing all 3 trees with only 1 replacement would be very detrimental to the neighborhood, and not having a way forward to actually replace that with more trees on the block in a clear, concise manner would be detrimental to the neighborhood. It would be nice if, while I don't want the trees to be removed, I understand that they might need to be removed, and if that's the case, I'd like them to be replaced in a relative time manner for these trees being removed.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak regarding this item? The public? Right.
Since this, Josh Clip, since this is a city-initiated removal, and we would not perhaps be strictly bound by the limitations of Article 16, what I am wondering is if, especially given what appears to be a real lack of trees anywhere else on that block, if the city would consider a biomass replacement formula, so essentially putting in as much trunk as it's taking out. I'm sure Madeline knows
Yeah.
exactly what that is.
Okay.
And also if the city would commit to doing that kind of replacement within 3 months of removal. Thank you.
I'm sure she's taking it down. Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Overhead, please.
All right. Yes, sir.
As you can see from this picture, here's the light pole up here. There's plenty of light coming down, so that shouldn't be a problem, even though they keep on saying that, just get out of here. Leave. So this light pole is not an issue because the surrounding area, there are other light poles that will give light to the bus stop that's there. And also, as you can see, it's under the wires. As you can see, this is a current picture that was taken in July. So therefore, it's under the wires, so it's not affecting the electrical wires. And so I would keep it, all three of them actually. And then in the second picture, as you can see, the light pole's up here. Here's the bus shelter down here. Here's the stop sign over here. I can sort of understand that's because they've done this in other parts of the neighborhood or other neighborhoods, taking out trees that are next to stop signs. I can understand that, but I really don't understand the issue of a light pole, especially as you can see there. There's another one over here. So security-wise, I think this is fine. This is again, these trees have been there for 30, 40 years, and then you want to take them out. I find that this is not a very good, and since the next item is going to be the same issue about ficus trees and next to a bus stop. So I find this is being targeted of the ficus trees next to bus stops. So this is a problem the city's you're having on your agenda with bus stops and ficus trees. And these are for you.
Can I take his remainder of his time?
Actually, you
okay.
have a fresh clock. Please state your name.
All right. My name is Michael Nolte, and when you this kind of makes me a little upset. Well, more than a little upset when you see that city agencies get together, kind of huddle together, and say, well, we're going to create a policy and do multiple things because we have a pot of money, and because we have a pot of money, we're going to create policies and do certain things, and the public is not part of that decision-making process, and then sees when we hear these things when we come to a meeting like this, that policies have been made by city departments to do things only really. This really boils down to. Because there's a bus stop there, knock down the trees. And well, let's go the other way around. Move the bus stop, and the trees should stay. I'm going to advocate for move the bus stop to the other end of the block, keep the trees. There's no, and even add more trees, because this is the policy of the city, is currently the policy of the city, that eventually more trees need to come into San Francisco. So there's not enough trees even on that block, so there should be actually more trees added. So if you're going to be doing anything on that block, it's to find more plots in the area and plant more trees. Come on, use imagination. let's do something right here. We have here a neighbor that says they don't want the trees removed. You have here that people have talked from the community. They say the same thing. We can come up with all kinds of reasons why the tree should go, but the trees can't speak, and so we are. And we are saying, let's find some mitigations. Move the bus stop. If the bus stop needs, this is the thing. Bus and bus stops in the future are going to be always rerouted. So killing a tree because of a bus stop currently is not a way to mitigate something. Then we'd be doing that all the time, and we'd have no trees anywhere near a sidewalk. So this is kind of a weird way of doing stuff in planning. This is not the proper way to be. I'm a citizen planner. This is not the way you plan a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak regarding this item? Does the department have anything further to add to this item? All right. This item is now closed, and we will now move to item number 201887. Consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement of 2 adjacent to 949 Fillmore Street, and the removal of 2 street trees without replacement adjacent to 950 Fillmore Street.
Madeline Farquhar, Urban Forestry. Staff has approved the removal of these 5 trees, and the public has protested. So just give a background of the site here. This is Fillmore between Fulton and Grove, I believe. McAllister, thank you. So unfortunately, this site has been, it's witnessed a couple catastrophic limb failures in the last couple of years. So we've been to this site quite a lot as a bureau. The trees have been pruned quite a bit. So I believe it was 2017 when this tree on the corner, the one that's not circled, failed. I can show maybe, let's see. Yeah, so this is just some examples of what's happened with the trees in the line here. It failed and kind of knocked over a few signs and some street lights and such, and I believe tree number 7 as well, if you can see it back here. So it's the one just to the right of the tree circled, where it was also an emergency removal just this year because of some cracks. And we've been back to the site quite a lot to prune the trees and to try and mitigate these risks, but just haven't been super successful in dealing with the poor structure of these trees. So just giving a little background. This is on the west side of the street. So just moving on to the trees that are up for removal now. These are the remaining 3 ficus trees on that end of the block. This is tree order number 8 at 949 Fillmore. There's a few issues with this tree. You can see the large decay column. There is good response growth, so it's not the end-all be-all for causing the hazard for this tree, but you can also see on the other side of the tree not a very good trunk flare. We call it poor tapering, which is often an indicator of like girdling roots. So roots underneath the surface that are sort of choking out the tree in a way. So it can lead to root decay. So roots should normally splay out kind of in a radial pattern, but oftentimes when they're planted, they're not root pruned, and you start getting these, horizontal roots wrapping around. Again, it's an indicator, not for certain, but whenever we see this poor trunk taper, it's a cause for concern. You can also see some of the typical ficus issues here. So we've got codominant stems and included bark. It also doesn't have a great live crown ratio. Again, that's kind of the ratio of the canopy to the overall height of the tree. And you want to see, somewhere around like 40 to 50% of the tree. When you start to see all these weird little leggy branches coming up, it's not a great sign, but is often a sign of just crowding and, overall site conditions. Okay, on to tree number 9. Very similar issues with the codominant stems and included bark. Both tree number 8 and tree number 9 are replaceable. They might need to be spread out a bit. The basins might need to be shifted to achieve better spacing. So really, it's just structural issues that are going on with this tree. And same with tree number 10. It's a little bit smaller than the others, but similar structural issues. And again, you see that poor trunk taper down at the bottom. This tree is not replaceable because it's very close to the sewer. Current conditions do not show a sewer clean out, but I believe it is still there. I believe that small sewer clean out that's kind of floating in the garden has probably been, or in the basin has been removed. It's also very close to a utility pole. Sometimes we can deal with that if it's not a light pole or it doesn't have any facilities attached to it, but in this case, it's mainly the sewer that's causing the issue. We also posted 2 ficus across the street at 950 Fillmore. These are the ones that are in the bus stop. So tree number 1 is probably doing the worst out of the ficus on the block. You can see it's got a declining canopy, and it also has some of the structural issues, 3 major codominant stems, poor trunk taper. Unfortunately, these 2 trees are not replaceable where they stand. There's a possibility of replacing them with smaller stature trees in the landscaping area adjacent to the building, but it would probably be preferable for everyone to have a replacement of similar stature elsewhere on the block where there's room, or both. So this is just tree number 2 at 950 Fillmore, closest to the bus stop. It's probably the largest stature of all the ficus on the block and has the biggest codominant stems. Some evidence of decay in the branches, and some evidence of prior branch failures. So overall, it's always a tough call with the ficus. We want to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. We didn't post all of the ficus on this block for removal, but because of the past conditions, and just to be consistent with other cases that we've heard and brought forth, we chose to approve the removal of these trees.
Is the property owner appellant here for this case? Do they wish to speak? If the property owner appellant is not here, is there any member of the public that wishes to speak here? Please state your name for the mic, please.
Hello, I'm Wydia Bettine, and I would not like to see that tree order 2 be removed because that bus stop, like in case it rains or something, I would want like some type of shelter when it rains heavily, and it seems like it's the one that doesn't really have that much issues with it. And then the other 2 trees, I think the first one you mentioned, I saw the big old branch that fell down, and I called that in. And basically, if you could trim them down, but you just said you did pruning, so I don't mind that tree being gone, but I'm just rooting for that tree right there, number 2. To be honest. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please state your name.
As the appellant for this item, I'm going to start with the...
As the appellant, excuse me, you said you're the appellant for this
Yeah,
item?
I'm protesting it, yes.
Oh, okay, as a member of the public.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway,
Okay.
but I'm the appellant, I'm protesting. So, I guess my pen's right here. So here is the trees at 949 Fillmore. You've already removed 1 tree right here. These trees are fine. As you can see, you have the 22 Fillmore going down the street. And so the real issue here is the clearance for the bus, and we have no idea what the buses are going to look like in the future, and also they may be changing. So the real issue here is, again, is the buses. There are no utilities above, and there's a pole, but the pole is for the that she was referring to is for to hold up the.
Can you lower the picture a little
Oh.
bit? We're not quite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's better.
Okay, so you see the lines here, you see these are the, for the 22 Fillmore, these are the trolley lines. And so the issue is that the pole that she refers to holds up the pole, the trolley line. So it's not a light or anything on that side. And you've already removed a tree right here. So that's about all I would be aimable for. Then here's a picture of the whole street. And as you can see, we have some barrens on this side, and we still have room, and I believe there's an empty plot right here. So again, we got to remember that this is a major corridor. So again, these trees were put in. Again, the ficus trees were put in 1950s and 60s. So this is why they're at this stage, and also because we went through a drought. So I would again not be concerned about removing them. There's no real reason to remove them. As far as I'm concerned, and again, these will probably be repealed if you do try to remove them. Next, this is the bus shelter, and as you can see, we have clearance, and also we have plenty of lights around this corner. Each corner has lights, street lights. So any issue with the shade from the street, from the trees canopy is not affecting the people waiting for the 22 bus at the bus shelter. So there's plenty of light, and also you can see that the wiring is underneath, and that's actually probably what it's the MTA cutting for the wires for the 22 Fillmore, because you don't see any other utility, PG&E or anything wires on that Fillmore Street. So thank you very much, and these are for you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Yes, thank you. State your name.
Yeah, Josh Clip. So the one quick note is that because this is Fillmore Street, it gets a lot of automobile traffic and a lot of pedestrian traffic. So this is exactly where we need to have trees as opposed to take them out and not replace them. Quickly, I'd like to refer to the 2014 Urban Forest Plan. One of the main objectives of that plan was to ensure that trees are planted to create an equitable canopy around the city, and is especially focused on neighborhoods that have historically been home to to economically disadvantaged communities, such as the Fillmore. When a private homeowner seeks to remove a tree that cannot be replaced, they are assessed an in lieu fee for the value of that tree. Here, because it's a city-initiated removal, I understand that that's not what's in the law, but I would request that the director consider holding himself and his department to at least the standard it holds private citizens, if not more than that, and specifically not just not being okay with lack of replacement and no money, because that's what we're saying here. If it were a citizen, they'd have to pay for it, which would then go right back into planting more trees. So what I would ask is that the department go back and look at this and, at a minimum, find other places to plant replacement trees in this immediate vicinity, which I'm pretty sure it won't have trouble doing that. And even more than that, again, I'm going to say it today and I'll keep saying it, biomass replacement formula. So if we're taking out 12 inches of trunk, put in 12 inches of trunk in the Fillmore, and Lord knows they need it. Thank you.
Thank you. So anyone else from the public wishes to speak? Please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Hi, Michael Nolte. You know, some time ago, we talked about, there's an online petition with over 4,000 signatures, specifically about, you know, put it in a nice way, the war on FICAs. You know, FICAs throughout the city have been targeted by the Department of Public Works to go along and say, well, we're not only going to create a set of guidelines that we have for all trees, we're going to create a set of guidelines specifically for FICAs. And then we're going to go and have create this sort of scare into everybody saying how dangerous FICAs are. And if you happen to have one, you know, we better cut them down because, you know, that 7% of the population of trees that are called FICAs have some sort of problems, and we need to get rid of them right away. And then what happens is they put together a proposition that creates some money for the city to start taking over the responsibility of the trees. And then what do they do about that? They say, well, you know, it's going to take a while to hire people. It's going to take a while to do certain things. But we have to go through the process. But we're going to start with probably FICAs in part, particularly. And so they start going to large areas. I mean, here you're talking about a handful of trees. And say, well, you know, that one, that one, that one, that one. And the neighborhood's going to say, wow, look how many are gone just because the city now has control. And they don't know what to do about it because most citizens, the average citizen, doesn't understand, go to City Hall, or you have to write to somebody. Who do I write to? Or they see a posting that's up on a tree and it doesn't last there very long. And, you know, here again, the issues, a bus stop is involved, and they've mentioned a couple other issues. Well, you're finding reasons why the poor old trees can't stay. Well, what was there first? Probably the tree, and then came maybe the bus stop. Who knows? But, you know, how long will the bus stop stay? And, you know, we as life on this planet, we need to have oxygen, and we rely on trees. And you can't just go around removing trees, and in particular neighborhoods that actually need more trees to survive. So, because, you know, of the air pollution and other things, the noise and other things that the trees help mitigate. So, I would like to see that if some trees are being planted, that more of them planted, maybe 2 for 1. Because if one goes out, 2 need to go in. And city needs to find that money.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public wishes to speak regarding this matter? Seeing no one, does the department have anything to add? All right, this item is now closed. And we will now move on to our final item this evening. Order number 201888 to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement adjacent to 2445 High Street, Francisco Park. 3 olive trees are in sidewalk on Bay Street.
Madeline Farquhar, Urban Forestry. The staff has originally denied the removal and the applicant has appealed. This is just an overview of the site. You can see 1, 2, 3 olive trees on Bay Street. And they're originally proposed for removal and replacement. And also, they're actually proposing to retain the olives and transplant them into Francisco Park, as this is a part of a major renovation project of the park. This is hopefully going to be done in order to optimize the number of replacements at the street. So as it stands, the spacing of the olive trees kind of reduces the amount of tree replacements in this case. So from inspecting, after going out to look at the trees, couldn't find any major defects. They're healthy olives. There are some trunk like abrasions, almost like they've been scraped in some way, but nothing that's a major defect. Overall, they're healthy and vigorous. And we appreciate the desire to max out the street trees, and we do understand that Rec and Park has the capability of transplanting mature trees successfully. However, it's pretty hard to establish street trees just because of a lot of the challenges that they typically face on the street. And we do have some concerns over transplanting mature trees because of the likelihood of shock for older trees. However, there's been continuing discussion, and based on the applicant's commitment to ensure the tree's survival, we're open to the idea of transplanting these trees. And if, for whatever reason, they don't survive that transplanting into the park, we just recommend requiring 48-inch box size replacements, so in-kind size replacements. And that's it.
Thank you. So property owner appellant here for this case. Wish to speak? City owns the property. All right, any member of the public wishing to speak can address this item. Just step up to the mic and state your name for the record, please. And if you have any photographs, just place them in the projector there.
I will, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Brendan McDevitt. I'm representing the Francisco Park Conservancy. I actually thought I was presenting, so do I just have 2 minutes?
You're represent. All right,
a-
we'll give you. Go ahead.
I have a PowerPoint.
We'll give you beyond 2 minutes.
Thank you.
We'll give you 3. Okay. Give you 3 minutes. So the Francisco Park Conservancy is a nonprofit group that's formed by 12 community members, and they've come together and partnered with the Rec and Park Department and have, this is a 100% donor-funded park. There's no city dollars going into this park. And they've started construction. There's a number of amenities that would be constructed with this park. We're still in need of raising about $2 million to deliver all of the amenities that we intend to for the public. So everything is a financial challenge for this project. So since 1966, this is the site of San Francisco's first reservoir, but it's been abandoned since then. It's a bit of an eyesore, as you could tell. So we've created a plan here through numerous community meetings that has evolved into this park. So I'll try to point out just a little bit about the park. So I can't seem to find a cursor on here. If you look at the top of the screen, that is Bay Street. And to the right, where there are trees lining the street, that is Hyde Street, where the cable car runs. And to the left is not actually a street. It's kind of a continuation of Larkin, but it's really just stairs that are owned by DPW and some growth of trees there. At the bottom of Bay and Hyde is a main entry point. Out on the street, we have an ADA parking spot with a ramp. And so for this 3 olive trees we'd like to transplant into the park, I've submitted a letter from our arborist, that is a RPD recommended arborist, that says these are very good candidates for transplant. He sees them as strong, healthy trees that could do well with a transplant. And by removing those 3 olive trees and respacing, it enables us to plant an additional 6 trees.
So we can plant 14 trees along Bay Street. If we plant 6 fewer, it would mean only 8 trees out there. So we would very much like to transplant the 3 carefully with the right professionals involved and our arborists on site and be able to get an additional 6 trees in on Bay Street.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
So the other areas of the park I want to point out is if you look along Bay Street, you could see the 3 olive trees there, that spacing. They're about 75 feet apart, and we're proposing to replant 20 feet apart per the ordinance. In the distance, you see Hyde Street. Sorry, it's difficult to see, but there's existing trees. There's 16 trees on Hyde Street currently, and the ordinance would require 18. However, there's no other place to plant because, let me get a better view. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit. This is some close-ups of the olive trees. So they're in good condition, very capable of being transplanted. Apparently, they come from Italy whenever they need new ones, so they're used to traveling around a little bit. This is a copy of the letter from our arborist. Then on Hyde Street, I want to point out the area that you see that does not have trees, it's about 120 feet long, and it's the structural bridge for the cable car. So it's a structural slab. You could even see the rebar coming through the sidewalk and the parking strip. So there is no place to plant a tree there, otherwise we would. So to have that considered as part of the linear footage is problematic because it tilts it in a way that we can't address. So if we were to dig up the 16 trees that exist and replant them, that would cause undue stress to the trees that we're very concerned about, only to get 2 additional trees in there somehow. And we actually don't see where they would fit because there's so much infrastructure for the cable cars. Their control panel for the cable cars, which is a very important tourist item to the city, and we don't want to have any fingers pointed at us for bringing that down. But we really don't see a practical way to add 2 trees, so we're a bit stuck there. And I'll point out that we are building a park that's going to have about 50 trees in it. So trees are very important to us on this project. It's a 4.3 acre park, and it's going to be primarily native planting, new native planting that we are contract growing for. So it's a very, it's not a developer, it's not a condo complex, it's a park.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. Given our time constraints, we do have a copy of the presentation, but if you,
Okay.
if you want to sum it up, just, you know.
Yeah,
give
let me
you
just
about
sum real quick.
Another, yeah.
So this is the other side, that's Larkin Street. There's no place to plant trees because you could see there's no sidewalk. And it kind of, the narrow sidewalk dead ends right there at the top. And then it's hard to see, but if you go down towards Bay Street, you see the orange fence. That's just stairs going through a very densely planted area of tea trees, a pine and a toyon tree. So there's no place to plant on Larkin either. So what we're proposing is that we are allowed to transplant the 3 olive trees, put in the 14 street trees on Bay Street, and have the fees waived, because this is a 100% donor-funded park, and they're talking about close to $72,000 in trees that we're not planting for in lieu fees, but we're planting 50 inside the park. We'd like to get the credit for that, because we can't plant trees where we can't plant trees, and we're kind of in a spot there. So that is our request, is to get those fees waived.
And just to be clear, where would you transplant the olive trees to? Inside the park somewhere, or? I'm just
Yeah, to be,
curious.
oh, that one's louder. To be determined, but we're open to the best location. We're still looking at where it would be best, and we're happy to work with Urban Forestry and Reckham Park to identify that location.
Okay.
Those 3 locations.
And it's a Reckham Park property, but they're not here today, is that it?
They are not here today, yeah. And I will add that at the end of this project in August of 2020, it gets gifted to the city as a park, as a city park. So it'll be the Reckham Park.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. All right, thank you very much, sir. Anyone else from the public wish to speak regarding this item? Thank you. Like, we have a copy here, so thank you very much.
As a native San Franciscan, surplus property, giving it, not using it first for housing and turning it into a park, I find appalling. Number two, finding out that this is the Cable Claw site, and a couple blocks up is Lombard Street, another tourist destination in the city, and you have people that are waiting for the cable car to get up to Lombard Street. I find this, again, those are two musts for tourists is to see be on the cable car and also go to Lombard Street. And then also finding out that this is, again, surplus property, they're taking it and then they're going to give it to Rec and Park. I find that a little wrong because, again, surplus property, first, when it was introduced, the ordinance said it had to be for housing. And this is surplus property. This is exactly what's happening right now with the reservoir at across the street from City College. That is turning into housing. So this site was not looked for housing, and now you want to put a park in. I find that very questionable, having a donor base in hearing that you don't have the money to plant and put together a park and then give it to the city, where the city doesn't have enough money for Rec and Park, and Rec and Park has a very limited budget because it can't even maintain the parks that it currently has. We have over 200 parks in the city and county of San Francisco, and you're adding another one, and you're trying to give it to Rec and Park that has a very poor track record dealing with trees and also maintaining its parks. So I think this is not a good use of surplus property, and handing it over to Rec and Park and allowing this quasi entity to take over the surplus property, turn it into a park, and then gift it to the city when it's already city property in the first place. So it should be, like I said, per the ordinance that were passed for surplus property, it should be for housing, not for Rec and Park or a park. So I think somebody's misinterpreting the rules of the city and what was the ordinances that were passed for surplus property. And also, if this is a tourist destination, I think they would rather see houses than a park that we have plenty of parks or open space around the wharf. So I don't see what you're not competing with anything here. And also, you have a couple blocks away, you have a high school, and that has a park on both sides of it, only a couple blocks away. So there's plenty of open space in the immediate area. And also, we have the ocean and the bay.
All right, thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak regarding this item?
Josh Clip. Based on Rec Park's track record, frankly, I wouldn't trust them to transplant a bonsai tree. So I would ask that if that happens, Urban Forestry and the experts there be in partnership and directly involved with that. Further, I would ask that there be something in the decision that addresses any failure of those transplanted trees. From what I can tell looking at them, olives are really slow growing. Those seem to me to be some pretty mature, established olive trees. I'm a little surprised that there's a determination they could be successfully transplanted, but I leave that to the experts. That's a lot of root mass you'd be trying to pull up there. So again, I defer to the experts at Urban Forestry, but ask that they be involved in that. I'm sorry, the nonprofit, was it a neighbor? Francisco Park Conservancy, yeah, thank you. Gentleman, Mr. McDevitt, mentioned that there was still $2 million to be raised on this. So just from a timeline perspective, it's unclear if these are just coming out, where they're going to go, where they're going to sit. And I know that permits need to be acted upon in 6 months. So just from a timeline perspective, I'm wondering how much sense it makes to be talking about a removal right now if there's still, we're still pretty far from the finish line. There was some discussion about a waiver. I don't think that that's maybe at issue here today, but just while I'm addressing it, I would just point out that the in lieu fees, when planting requirements are waived, go to plant trees all over the city. So even though there will be many trees put into the park, this is something that goes into as a matter of a public resource and a public asset. And finally, I would just reiterate what I said earlier. It is so hard for street trees to establish. I appreciate what this group is doing. I appreciate they're trying to create more green and open space for the residents. I would also just say that it's really, really, really tough for a street tree to grow in this city, and they should be preserved if they are healthy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Just a second. Yes, sir. Mr. Nolte.
Hi, my name is Michael Nolte, and just want to show the differences between we're not all alike, and I'm actually going to say that, San Francisco has for some time, we have a deficit of trees, and so it's refreshing to actually come to a hearing and hear about plans that more trees may be actually in the future, because I didn't hear no timeline, trees planted. On one hand, that sounds like a great idea, because we all like to see more trees. But on the other hand, what's on the agenda is moving some trees around and not sure where they're going to go. So I think that these permits should be suspended until there is an actual timeline and commitment and direction and planning. I mean, it sounds like people have a lot of ideas, but I don't know, maybe they don't have a policy person on their committee to help them understand. You can't just have a bunch of ideas. You got to be able to get those ideas to actually happen. And again, as a public planner, that I don't get paid, a citizen planner, I don't get paid, but I've dealt with a lot of planning, seen a lot of plans through over 20 years. These are the things that you do when you go to a decision-making body. You have the answers to the questions and not just come up with, oh, this is an idea, we want you to accept it, but yet we don't have all the answers to give you. On the other hand, also, tonight you're one of the decision makers on this topic, and I would direct this to be tabled until there are some decisions that are answered, because I don't see you having, unless you got more information handed to you than the public got seen today in the overhead. So I think if you got more information and it's helpful you to come to some conclusion, great. But the way I saw it today, it left a lot of questions in my mind about how this could actually happen. But I do want to give them kudos for the idea of in some long range time they're going to plant some trees. And developers don't even take the time to think about that. That's usually, we're going to put up some artwork somewhere, and somewhere we're going to put some trees. All the things have been mandated on them to do because they have to be, doing something in the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, with the appellant, have any rebuttals? Have 2 minutes.
Okay. Hi, Brendan McDevitt again. Just want to answer a couple of the questions. First, the Conservancy is in a public-private partnership contract agreement with the city right now. The project is under construction, and the funds are in place.
Are they in partnership with a particular agency in the city? Would that be
Yeah, Rec and
RPD?
Park, RPD,
Okay.
yes. And the park is under construction. There's funding in place for the base park. When I said that we're looking for $2 more million, it enables us to build a community garden and an upper pathway with a view terrace. But the base park can be completed. We submitted for this permit in March. I didn't know they even have these hearings until 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So, and in terms of maintenance, the Conservancy is committed contractually to pay for all of the costs of maintenance in perpetuity. So it won't be an additional financial burden to the city. So this group will stay intact and continue to fund And this project was approved at an RPD Commission meeting in March of 2018, I believe it was. So we are under construction now, and we will finish construction at the end of summer of 2020. It's just a matter of where our trees go. And when our contractor will be transplanting the trees if approved, and the location is, we have many proposals on where it can go, but we want to work with our partner, Rec and Park, to work where they would like them planted as well. So it'll be quite easy to determine where they should go.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? If there's no one else from the public or from the department, I will now close this item, and these hearings are now closed. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.